All right, good morning. God bless you. Thank you to all those who are here and all those that are tuning in. We appreciate you, and we certainly appreciate the likes and the shares. Enjoy the interaction, especially on the Wednesday nights when we do our little panel or whatever we want to call it. But we really enjoy that interaction, the comments, questions, that kind of thing. So please continue to do that. Please continue to stay involved. And if you haven't visited us here in person, then please come on and see us. This morning, the title that I gave Caleb to put on the sermon was, Is God Water? And before you all get your torches and pitchforks and kill me for blasphemy or whatever it is, hear what I have to say. So I'll tell you a little joke to start. That's pretty much my MO, right? So there was a family and mother and father. They had 3 boys, and their names were Snowflake, Leaf, and Brick. And Snowflake went to his mother and he said, "Mom, why is my name Snowflake?" And she said, "Well, on the day you were born, a snowflake landed on your head, and so we named you Snowflake." A couple days later, Leaf was talking to Snowflake, and he's like, "Yeah, Mom told me how I got my name." And he's like, "Oh, well, I'll go ask her how I got mine." So he goes and asks, and Leaf says, "Mom, how did I get my name? Why'd you call me Leaf?" She's like, "Well, on the day you were born, a little leaf landed on your head, and so we called you Leaf." And again, the kids are having the conversation, and Brick goes and he says to his mom, he says, "Ma, bibi boba, boba bee, mama." All right, for those that didn't get it, see me after the service. Oh, man. Oh, man. That one was too good not to share. All right, so water. Water. What is the big deal with water? What's the big deal? This morning, I'm a little parched. I've already had 2 bottles now. Not counting what I've already drank before that, right? You all probably woke up thirsty. Yeah? How many of you keep a glass of water on the nightstand? Or your first thing you do is go and get water, right? Why do you do that? Because you're thirsty in the morning. Because why? You've been fasting all night, right? Yeah, okay. Well, you're running out of water, right? It's like, well, why do we need water so often? Well, science will tell us when we're born, we're nearly 90% water. Brand new babies, 90% water. Once we reach adulthood, this is kind of on the average, right? Men are about 60% water, and men are about 70% water. Women are about 65 to 68% water. The reason is because they generally, not always, but generally carry more fat. Fat has less water content than lean muscle, but regardless. When you die, you will be approximately somewhere between 50 and 55% water, which means that you're less water than you started out, right? You start out in all this water. Water is the most abundant substance in the entire universe. Not in the world, in the entire universe. In all the cosmos, it is the most abundant substance in existence. There's different forms of water, right? And actually, water is the only substance that exists in 3 forms. That's in its gaseous form, liquid form, and solid form. And in its solid form, it's the only substance that will float in its liquid form, which is weird, right? That is weird, because theoretically, ice should sink to the bottom of whatever vessel it's in, right? When it's in water, ice should sink. But what happens when water freezes and it becomes ice, the space between the H2O molecules, right? That's H2 hydrogen, 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. For those that did not take chemistry, for those that did take chemistry and passed barely. I barely passed chemistry, but anyways. Here's the deal. I'm not a chemist. I don't do that every day, so that's all right, you know. Came in. Yeah, he attended the class. Yeah. Some of you attended the class and didn't learn anything, but that's good. So, anyways, H2O. What happens is the space between those molecules actually expands instead of shrinking when it freezes, and that's what causes ice to become buoyant. Now we know, generally speaking, the Earth is covered in about 70% water, right? And of that 70% water, approximately 30-some% of it, I think it's right. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that's right. 30-some% of it, maybe it was 68% of the 70, was or is in ice caps. Okay, it's inaccessible to humans for the most part, and then fresh water only makes up about 0.3% of all the water on the planet. So the rivers and lakes and things like that, where we get our water that we drink, is only about 0.3% of all the water on the planet. And I know you're like, what the heck is he talking about all this water statistics for, or whatever? Anyways, or water facts. So, again, super abundant resource, or super abundant substance, and it's all over the place. It's all over the earth. It's all in your body. In fact, your blood is 90% water. The rest of it, is just nutrients, minerals and electrolytes and amino acids and things like that. And so water is kind of this carrier of things, right? In fact, in your body, it is what some scientists and some doctors refer to as the carrier of energy. Okay, so it carries, and even in electricity, right? It's a great conductor of electricity. But anyways, it carries the energy throughout your body. Now, let me read this real quick. Energy is one of the best leading indicators of good health and longevity. The more energy we have, the better we feel, the better our bodies are able to perform the many and varied processes that are in constant motion within our physiology. Higher energy levels allow for increased detoxification as well, which is critical to leading a healthy life, especially with the flood of modern toxins we bombard our bodies with every day. Moreover, we not only experience this flow, I'm going to stop right there. I'm not going to talk about that. So, water. There was a scientist. Oh, crap. No, let me just say this. We don't only deal with water, a flow in our bodies in the form of water, but we also have this experience in our emotions, okay? So I'll say that. We not only experience this flow in our physical bodies, but within our psyche as well, which has its own profound effects on our bodies. The flow of emotions can bring life or death to our being. When our flow is that of love and joy, we feel better physically. But when our flow is depressed and anxious, we feel the negative effects in our physiology. And so there was a scientist who, he's not really a scientist. He was actually more of a philosopher. Okay, but and if you look him up, they'll call him a pseudoscientist. Now, he was a scientist in the sense that he conducted research and he looked into this water thing, okay? His name is Masaru Emoto. And he's also an author. He's from Yokohama, Japan. He's actually passed away, but he insisted that human consciousness could affect the molecular structure of water. Emoto insisted that water was the central and connecting life force of the entire universe. He believed an understanding of water could help us understand how humans came to be and how we could live our best lives. Emoto began to study how our consciousness and words could affect the physical structure of water by freezing water and looking at the crystals it formed in the process under a microscope. which was inspired by the idea that every snowflake is unique. You've heard that, right? You've heard that your whole life. I've heard that my whole life. I had no idea why. I just thought, well, God's up there just clipping snowflakes, like the old Christmas movies. You know, I can't remember the name of that one. It's I think it's Jack Frost. Yeah, it's Jack Frost. The little, what do they call that? Claymation. So the little claymation movie of Jack Frost. You know, he goes up into the clouds and he's flying by, and he says, this is the whatever, this is the Winter Sisters, and these are the Howler Brothers, or whatever the deal is. But anyways, there's these little snow elves or whatever they are, and they're up there cutting snowflakes out, right? And then there was always one special one. I think the guy's name is Snip, who makes the Christmas snowflake, right? He made the one special one for Christmas. But anyways, so I've heard that my whole life, but I had no idea why, right? Well, scientists estimate that 10 to the 158, that's 10 with 157 zeros behind it, molecular combinations for snowflakes exist, okay? Which is 10 to the 70, so that's 10 with 69 zeros behind it, more combination than all molecules in the universe. So basically, there's more possibilities of a snowflake, right? The different varied shape, form, whatever, hexagonal crystals that it forms, right? Then there are molecules in the entire universe, almost times 2. That's absurd. So anyways, this is what inspired Emoto's experiment, right? He has this epiphany. He's thinking about the snowflake thing, and he says, oh my gosh, well, what if we freeze water and we look at it under a microscope? So he would freeze water in like a little basin or whatever, and then he tried to pull it out, and he tried to look at it, but he was having troubles because of the ice melting and all this stuff. So it was all, it would get distorted and stuff. So finally he builds this room, and it's like minus 5 degrees Celsius or something. And he gets a research assistant, and they start freezing this water. They start looking at it under the microscope, and what he finds is these crazy-looking crystals that form that look kind of like snowflakes. They're not exactly the same, but they look sort of like it. I was going to try to do some pictures this morning, but we'll worry about that another day. So he takes photos of the frozen crystals, and he sort of compares them one to another, right? And what he does to begin the experiment is he takes water from different sources and begins to take those pictures. And so he starts with natural spring water. And this natural spring water actually creates these beautiful hexagonal crystals. And they do. They look just like snowflakes. You can go look this up. Again, his name is Masaru, M-A-S-A-R-U, Emoto, E-M-O-T-O. You can just look up his name and then ice crystals. And you'll see the pictures. And so he takes water from like a tap, right? And he puts that under a microscope. Well, the thing with tap water, specifically in Japan, is most of it has chlorine in it, which most of our water here, in your tap, unless you have a well and you live in the city, your water has different minerals in it, but specifically it has chlorine in it. Chlorine is meant to, purify the water, right? That was introduced back at the turn of the 19th century, 20th century, in London, actually, or in England. So he took that, and he took pictures of the crystals that formed from that, and they were distorted. They were not as beautiful and clear, and didn't have as many nooks and crannies as the ones from the natural spring, right? And so then he took some pictures of like polluted water, dirty water, murky water, whatever. And it didn't hardly form any crystals at all. If it had too much stuff in it, it wouldn't even form crystals. It just created this blob of whatever, right? Just frozen blob, right? It's still water, but again, it just looked all distorted. So this got his research assistant thinking, right? And he says, well, what in the world would happen if we introduced the water to music before we froze the crystals? And he's like, oh, wow, that's a good idea, right? And so he said, I knew that obviously the vibrations of the music would probably have some kind of effect on water or on the ice. And so he's like, yeah, let's do that. So they played some classical music. I don't remember all the pieces, but they played some Chopin, some Beethoven, and when they played the music, they froze the water. And when they pulled the crystals out or looked at it under the microscope, they were seeing these beautiful, again, just gorgeous crystals being formed because of this music. And then they introduced other types of music. Specifically, they used like heavy metal, and it distorted the crystals. Again, it was just a crazy looking, weird. You just have to see them, and honestly, I wished I'd have got those pictures. But anyways, go look them up and look at them. Look at the difference in the pictures, and you'll see it's just the difference of seeing like the most beautiful snowflakes you've ever seen, and then this crazy, distorted, weird-looking frozen thing. So they go on with the music thing, and then he has another revelation, right? And in this revelation, he's thinking about, again, the music, right? The vibrations, the frequency of the music. It's creating a change in the water or in the crystals. And so he says, everything is in kind of a constant state of vibration, right? Let me see where I put that. Yeah. So, according to the Hanya Shingyo, this is the Buddhist Heart Sutra, that which cannot be seen has no form. That which can be seen has no form, and that which cannot be seen has form. That makes no sense, right? But this principle is what he built the rest of his experiment on. Because the laws of physics tell us that everything in the universe is in a constant state of vibration. Everything consists of invisible molecules called atoms. Those atoms are constantly moving, oscillating, and resonating at different frequencies. These frequencies now can be measured with modern technology, and we have an understanding of the emotional state of an individual based on their current the frequency they are currently emitting. That's how deep we can go with this frequency thing. So this was his theory, right? Everything's in a constant state of motion. Everything kind of is vibrating. Everything has a frequency. Everything has a resonance, right? So it's the same with words. When we speak words, right, that goes out as a sound, and that sound resonates, right? And I may say something today that resonates with something inside of you that's perhaps deeper than just what you hear in your ear, right? And it's the same when you sing songs or you hear a song or you listen to music, whether it's just the music or it's a song that somebody writes and they sing, right? We hear this resonance, or there is a resonance that happens on the inside of us when we hear these different things. And so his theory, again, was that the words, not only spoken words, but written words could have a resonance, right? It would have some sort of frequency that it was putting out. And so he says, well, ink written on a page, right, is the same thing as words that are coming out of my mouth. It's molecules that are attached to other molecules, right? The ink is clinging to the paper, and thus it is vibrating at some frequency. And so he took paper and he took bottles. He put the water in the bottle, right? He wrote down different words and different phrases on these little pieces of paper, and he wrapped it around the bottle with the words facing inward. And the first bottle that he set up said, "You fool," right? Now, this is like an English translation of whatever he was saying in Japanese. So it's a little bit, whatever. Like, "You fool, you idiot, you're stupid," whatever. Something along those lines is what he wrote on the first bottle. On the second bottle, he wrote, "I love you," and joy and gratitude, those types of words, right? And he wrapped the bottles up. Then they took that same water out of both of those bottles and they looked at them under the microscope once they had been frozen. The water from the bottle that had the harsh words, right? The mean words, the hateful words, the crystals were distorted. The crystals were out of shape. The hexagonal forms were not there like the water from the natural spring that had this beautiful, or the water that was exposed to the classical music, these beautiful sonnets, right? And so when he got the other bottle, the love, the gratitude, the peace, the joy, those types of words, when they looked at that under the microscope, these same beautiful crystals appeared. These beautiful hexagonal shapes that were the same as that from the natural spring. These beautiful pictures of, again, just like the most amazing snowflakes you've ever seen in your life. That's what they saw. And so he continues this theory, right? That he continues on with it. He does this experiment. He repeats it over and over and over. Now, when you look this stuff up, when you read some of his critics, or you just read in general about, these ideas or whatever, people are going to say that it's pseudoscience, right? It's fringe science. This is stuff that doesn't really make any sense. There's no way to really prove it. They even try to disprove him by saying that he wouldn't disclose how he was conducting his experiments and all this, BS. And so, but it was one of those things. It was like, listen, man, if we're going to live somewhere, right, I'd rather not live in the box that somebody has constructed for me. I'd rather live on the fringes, right? Now, I understand the box. I need the box, right? I needed that. Actually, Brent was talking about this the other week. I need that box, right? I need to be able to put my foot in this box so that I can put this foot out of the box, right? I need to be able to stay in the order of, hey, let's use the scientific method to kind of come up with these ideas, but let's reach way out here on the outside and see exactly what is possible, right? So, yes. So, Emoto, he took these pictures for like 6 years. He conducted these experiments and took these pictures. He's got all these pictures just basically laying on his desk, and he's like, I got to do something with these pictures. And so he actually writes a book, puts the pictures in there, translates the descriptions to English, all this stuff. He ends up self-publishing the book, putting it out there to the world, right? And then all these people start to get interested in this idea. One of the people was a Swiss scientist named Jonas Davis. And she had studied for decades, she had studied water, specifically groundwater. Now, groundwater is the water that goes from the sky, right, down to the ground, but not only like on the surface of the ground or just seeping into like your lawn or whatever, which, by the way, like my lawn is looking really good right now. Like I fertilized it and then mowed it yesterday. It looks great. How about you guys? No? Okay. Anyways, so yeah, man. Hey, it's springtime, beautiful. The rains come. The warm weather's coming in. Everything's turning green and vibrant, right? It's beautiful. So not just the water that soaks into your lawn or your flower bed, but this is the water that gets deep, 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 deep into the earth, okay? This groundwater can take scores or even hundreds of years to get into the earth and become true groundwater. And so Davis calls groundwater wise water. Yeah. She calls it wise water. And she calls fresh water, or water that's rained down, today or yesterday or whatever, she calls that juvenile water. All right? And I'm telling you this because, again, as the most abundant substance in the universe, right, this water, it's been around for a really long time, okay? And in fact, some scientists believe that the earth was formed or became what it is today by the water of the universe kind of coming around in its cycles and landing on earth. So essentially, this is the idea, right? And this is fact, right? There's these giant blocks of ice that fly around in the universe, okay? So it's like wrapped around comets and things like that, and it's going through the universe. It's making its rounds, right? It's going through its cycles, whatever. And so billions of years ago, this is the theory, billions of years ago, the earth is just this rock, right? And this chaotic, insane mess is going on, right? And then we come out of this primordial ooze, and that kind of thing. But anyways, before the primordial ooze could come to life, right, there's all this ice that's entering Earth's atmosphere, and as it's entering the atmosphere, it's melting. and the water is falling to the earth, and it's starting to soak into the big giant rock that is the third planet from the sun, and all this stuff is happening. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm just telling you what science says, okay? And listen, this is what I like to think, okay? God is very imaginative. If I have the imagination that I have, I can't imagine what God's imagination is like, right? I mean, it's insane. And so when I think about, well, you say, well, God created the heavens and the earth in 7 days and 6 days, whatever, and then he took a rest, and this is how he did it, right? This is how he did it. Well, no, stop putting God in a box, okay? Maybe he did do the Big Bang thing, okay? Maybe he did, like, flip the light switch or whatever, snap his fingers, or, do the, what was the pinky thing that the panda did in Panda, the Kung Fu Panda? Skadoosh. Yeah. Maybe that's what he did, okay? I don't know. God's got a sense of humor, right? I mean, he made me. So, yeah, he better have one. That's right. But hey, maybe that's what he did. Skadoosh. And then boom, all this stuff is flying out into the universe, right? And in the process, maybe all this ice is floating around. And then maybe, you know what, I like to think that God was just like, I'm going to see if I can hit the earth from here. And there goes a big old ball of ice, right? He's throwing snowballs at planet Earth. Like, this is going to be Earth. I'm slinging these snowballs, like, and then, the angels over here, like, you're getting better, God. Your accuracy's going up 13% this week. Like, I don't know. Listen, I'm just having fun, okay? So all this ice is hurling around the planet, right, or it's getting hurled at the planet, whatever's happening, and it's beginning to fall to the earth. It's beginning to form, and again, it forms these gaseous things called clouds, right? And these clouds actually begin to rain down, and so on and so forth, right? And this water from all over the universe, not just in our galaxy, but from everywhere in the universe, is making its way to planet Earth as things swirl, right? Because everything's, again, in constant motion. There's a constant vibration. There's a constant flow. The Earth is spinning on its axis. It's spinning around the sun, and then all the other planets are spinning around, and then the moon is spinning around the Earth, and then the galaxy is swirling, and like, it's unreal, right? But there's this constant swirl, this constant motion. And so it's like, all this substance, all this water that's moving around the universe, right? It's picking up information. And there's a scientist, actually I think he was a doctor, but he's a French scientist, Jacques Benveniste. He published an article in 1988 in the Journal of Nature that described the effects of medicine on an ill patient that had been diluted to the point that it was no longer detectable in a syringe of water to provide to the patient. The scientists of his day, right, back in the 80s, they did not want to publish the article. In fact, Nature didn't want to publish the article because, again, they said it was pseudoscience. They said it was ridiculous. They said this is crazy, this is not possible. But what he purported was that water has a memory. Water can remember things. Come on now. And so he says this putting this medicine in the water and giving it to the patient will actually heal the patient. Now, this is an idea that is way older than Benveniste, okay? This is actually an idea that comes in homeopathy, which is like a natural type of medicine, right? Some of you maybe have been to a homeopath, right? But it actually began with Hippocrates, the Greek scholar, philosopher, right? And he kind of came up with, and I think he's kind of credited with saying it. I don't know if he actually said it, but like cures like. So it was the idea that, and we actually tested this back in the day, that if you had lead poisoning, the way that we could fix you, right, was to put a little, like, trace amounts of lead in water and actually give that to you, like in an IV or something like that, and it would eliminate the lead poisoning. And it's the same thing, it's the same concept as sound elimination. back in I think it was the 80s or 90s, somewhere around in there, the Japanese actually figured out that you could drown out one sound with another sound. If you found the frequency, if you found the right frequency, which would be kind of an opposing frequency, you could drown out the sound, okay? And we use this today, like white noise machines. You've heard of those? If you've ever been to your doctor or therapy or something like that, they might have something out in the lobby, or they may have something even in their room that's just making noise, right? And what it does is it actually drowns out the voices. Now, you might still hear some things if somebody has a real deep voice or they have a real high voice, and you may actually hear some noise, but you can't make out what they're saying, right? And because of these sounds, the frequencies are eliminating the other frequencies, okay? And so Ben Veniste said that, again, he took on kind of Hippocrates' idea that like cures like. And he said, I think that this will work, right? And then they tested it. They put this medicine inside of water, and then they diluted it down, they took the medicine, they diluted it down so much so that the medicine was no longer traceable in the water. It wasn't detectable. They couldn't pick it up with their tools for measurement, right? And so they give the water, right, to the patient, and they are cured. Their illness goes away. Their sickness is gone. And so again, the theory was that the water had actually remembered or memorized the cure. It had actually taken on properties of this medicine. All right, so again, all this water hurling around the universe, and it's falling on planet Earth, right? And for thousands and millions and billions of years, ever how long, there is all this water that is accumulating in the ground. And the water, the groundwater that can be found, actually will come up out of the earth, right? And we've actually heard Josh talk quite a bit about artesian wells, okay? The artesian well is basically water that's in a spring underneath the ground. And it's not just, again, this isn't just like water that's 2 or 3 feet deep. I mean, it's hundreds of feet in the ground. And it's between two different types of shell rock. And that rock creates all this pressure, right? And the water cannot escape. It's flowing right down into this lower elevation underneath the ground, and it creates all this pressure. And as it creates this pressure, the water wants to go somewhere, right? And so obviously it finds the path of least resistance, right? And it'll make its way out through what we would call a well or a spring. Now, an artesian well, there's two different kinds. It's the flowing artesian, and then there's just the artesian. Now, a flowing artesian well is a well that naturally has sprung up out of the earth. You didn't tap it, right? You didn't dig down and try to make a well and that kind of thing. You didn't tap into anything, okay? It just naturally started to come out of the ground. And there is a flow. There's a flow that you can get into as a person, okay? Now, this is an idea that's relatively new, I would say, as well. But people talk about flow state, right? When they get into their work, or they get into, maybe it's exercise or something like that. When they reach this certain state, right, where really nothing can take their focus off of what they're doing, and they're working as efficiently as humanly possible, right? That person at that moment. And it takes a little while to get into your flow state, and it takes work. You have to kind of eliminate distractions and that kind of thing. But when they get into that flow state, that's when they're the most creative. They're the most energetic, right? They're taking on, maybe it's a writer, right? And they finally they break past the writer's block, and they get into their flow state, and boom, next thing you know, they've written 57 pages of their book, right? That's kind of what flow state is. Again, same thing. You can have it when you're working out or whatever, and maybe physically you're able to do more than you've ever been able to accomplish in the gym. But there's a flow that you can get into that is natural, that does not have to be tapped, okay? In other words, there are ways, right, we can kind of tap into our energy or whatever you want to call it. We can tap into, we would call it the Holy Ghost, okay? There's ways that you can kind of coerce yourself into that flow. We do it at church with music. We do it with times of worship. We do it with times of prayer. And that's what kind of helps us get into the flow. But there may be days that you wake up and you're already in that flow. There's days that you wake up, you're already feeling the flow of the Spirit. It's just naturally coming out of you, okay? And that flow, we'll get into it in a little bit, but that's what Jesus talks about, right? The rivers of living water that can come from deep down within inside of you. And then what he's talking about is an artesian well. And again, Josh has talked about this, but an artesian well that springs out of the earth, all right? And when we go to the Scriptures, and I forget how many times the word water is mentioned in Scripture. It's like, 700 times, whatever it is, or 400 times or something stupid. It's a lot. It's talked about a lot. And water is used a lot within religion. Water is used for ceremonial cleansings, things like baptisms, which is something that we do, or washing people's feet, which is also something that we do. Even in Brent did a wonderful job with the brazen laver that's in the temple, right? It's filled with water. They come, they wash their hands, right? Just your hands. But they come and wash their hands. But anyways, the ritual of cleansing things and making things pure, it comes by way of water. It's this ever-abundant substance, apparently anyways, right? That's everywhere. That's in all things. It's all around us right now even. It's inside your body. There's water vapors in the air. There's water outside. It's literally raining today, right? It's everywhere. This substance can be found in in every living thing on the planet. And some things consist of 80, 90 plus percent of water, right? Like fish are like 80% water. Plants are like 90% water, most of them. And it's literally everywhere. But again, only so much of it is accessible to humans, right? Fresh water as far as for consumption or things like bathing. And, again, how many of you take a shower every day? Don't raise your hand. I don't want to embarrass anybody. No, hopefully, yeah, the ones who don't, we know who you are. No, hopefully you bathe on the daily, right? There you go. Thank you for your honesty, Margie. That ritual cleansing that you do every day in the form of taking a bath or taking a shower, right? It's a religious ritual, right? It's something that actually sort of began in religion, in ancient religions, okay? To make ourselves clean, to purify ourselves. But anyways, that's what this water does. The water detoxifies. It takes away. In fact, it is the highest, has the highest rate of solvency, I think is how of any substance on the planet. There's nothing else that will dissolve things like water. The only thing that it won't dissolve is oil. That's why we have to use soaps and stuff to get rid of oils. But regardless, that the water will cleanse. It'll cleanse your body. When you drink water, it will actually cleanse the inside of your body, right? It'll clean out all those things. You're drinking sodas every day. Pick up a bottle of water, you'll feel better, right? So that water, go ahead and move on to something. But that water takes on the properties of other things, right? We already kind of talked about the words and all that kind of stuff. The idea that the words can affect the actual water itself. But it'll also take on properties of other things. So if you take natural spring water, okay, and you put it into a bottle, it is immediately contaminated because it immediately takes on the characteristics of the plastic. Okay, so when you put water in plastic, it actually starts to become plastic. That sounds weird, but that's what happens. Okay, and what we do is we claim, or companies claim, right, that this is natural spring water, right? This is purified water. And it's like, no, it's not actually pure. It's actually contaminated with plastic. You're drinking it. Not trying to scare anybody from drinking water or drinking bottled water. That's the best source of water that we have right now, okay? Outside of, you got a spring at your house that's bubbling up, right? Go drink some natural mountain water. Don't drink downstream. Okay, so we've already talked about the influence that words, right, or the impact that words can have on water. Emoto's experiment had proved that water could be affected by the words, not only spoken words, but written words. Now, there's another experiment that he did. And actually, every family in Japan a lot of families in Japan at the time that, or after he released this information, they conducted the same experiment and got the same results. What they did was they put rice in a jar. I'm not sure if they put water in the jar as well. I think they had to have put some. Anyways, so the rice is sitting there. I'm pretty sure it was water in the jar, right? And they had 2 jars. The one jar, they wrote words like love and gratitude, faced it inward at the rice, okay? Then on the other jar, they did other words like I hate you, or you fool, or you're an idiot, whatever, that type of stuff. And they put that on the jar facing inward to the rice. No, I'm sorry. I'm mixing my things up, mixing my experiments up. They spoke the words. Apologies. They took the rice, 2 jars, 1 jar. They said, I love you, you're beautiful, you is smart, you is important, you is kind. You is kind, you is smart, you is important. Okay, they said those things to the rice, okay? And then the other jar, yeah, I know. The other jar, they said, you're an idiot. You know, that's a Happy Gilmore reference. Isn't that what he says? Hey, Gilmore, you're an idiot. Isn't that what he says? I think that's what he said. Something like that. I can't remember. Oh, yeah. That was the Grinch. Anyway, so they said, you know, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're not important. And as they spoke those words to the jars of rice, the one jar fermented. It like created this almost like rice wine, right? And then the other jar actually began to rot. So the jar that they spoke the negative words to, the rice began to rot and decay, grow mold and things like that. The other one grew mold, I guess theoretically in the fermentation process, but it wasn't like poisonous. It wasn't rotting. It was actually just fermenting. And so they released this information. All these families in Japan actually conducted the same experiment in their home. And then there was a bunch of families that took another jar, a third jar, and they filled it with the rice and whatever other substance, and they put it over in the corner and ignored it. And the one that was ignored actually rotted faster than the one that was spoken poorly to. The one that was ignored, that was shoved over in the corner, paid no attention to, just walked past it every day, didn't acknowledge its existence, actually rotted faster than the one that they gave negative attention to. Now, there's something to be said about psychology and, of course, all of these things, right? That the use of negative words, negative language, hateful words, right? It's not good for you. It's not good for other people. When you say terrible things to people, when you call them stupid or you call them idiots or whatever, listen, I don't care if you're saying it to their face or if you're driving down the road and you're saying it to the person in the other car. Because what is happening is a resonance is being created, and you're actually sending a frequency, you're sending an energy, you're sending out information for that person's being to absorb. You aimed it right at them. You weren't talking about somebody else. That's right. There's a curse that's being hurled, right? An accusation that's being hurled that's not true about that person. And the same goes for when you say positive things. when you tell people that you love them, when you tell people, that they're beautiful, that they matter, that they're unique, that they're smart, that you're proud of them, all those different things. When you say those things, you're sending another frequency. You're sending a better frequency. It actually makes that person feel good. It makes them feel better. Their energy actually goes up instead of down. And what we've learned in modern science and psychology is that we can actually measure the frequency of people's emotions. This earlier, but they can actually pick it up on scans. And certain emotions have certain frequencies. When you're depressed, when you're sad, when you're anxious, they actually have lower number of frequencies. They're heavier frequencies. But when you're happy, when you're joyful, when you're at peace, you actually have higher frequencies, which are sort of lighter. And so you can actually be standing in a room, and I'm sure you've had this happen to you. You can be standing in a room having a good conversation with someone. You can feel the positive energy that's coming off of this person. You're putting out positive energy, and all of a sudden somebody walks into the room and you feel like somebody threw a wet towel on the fire. And it's because their energy, right, their life force is actually down. And so it's a frequency that comes across, and it can be seen in the face, can be seen around the chest area, around the heart. You can feel the brokenness. You can feel the hurt. You can feel pain. You can feel the anger, the depression, the anxiety. You can feel all those things coming off of a person. And especially if you know the person, right? You don't have to know the person, but if you do, you can pick up on it even quicker. If my wife is in a bad mood, I'm going to be able to know pretty quickly, because I'm around her all the time, right? I know what joy looks like on her. I know what peace looks like on her. I pick it up. The radar, it doesn't have to be on high alert. But you pick it up like that. She knows the same for me. The same with our children, especially mothers. Mothers are especially good intuiting, or however you want to say it. Their intuition, their mother's intuition kicks in, right? You immediately know what's wrong with that little boy. You immediately know something's going on. This isn't right. It's not just a fever, Michael. It's not just a fever. We've got to do something else. He needs to go to the doctor. There's been times that my wife has told me that, right? No, it's fine. It'll pass. It's okay. It's not a big deal. No. Something is wrong. Something more is going on here. We need to get him to a doctor. We need to get him to a physician. And that's again, we have that with everyone, but especially those people that you know. You can pick up on those things. And it's because it's coming in at these varied frequencies, right? And those frequencies, those energies, they're having a cause and effect relationship, right? There's a cause and effect going on. And so with those same words, with those same energies, you can affect yourself. Is it that the water experiment works so well? Why is it that Emoto's ideas translate so easily to the psyche or so easily to the physical body? Because you're made up of all this water. You got all this water on the inside of your body, right? You're literally 60, 70% water. And you're able to have an influence on the molecular structure of yourself, your body even. Not just your mind, not just the thoughts that you have, but the thoughts that you have actually affect your physiology. And one of the things that I've gotten into over the last several years is kind of meditation, deep breathing, all those kinds of things. And what I realize is that when I get into that meditative state, I get out of those negative thoughts, I get out of those negative ideas, the body feels 100 times better. I can't even explain to you the difference, and only you can know, right? But when you get into that flow, you get into that state, whether it's a time of prayer, it's a time of meditation, it's deep breathing, it's worship, it's praise, whatever it is, when you get into those modes, your literal physical body will begin to feel better. It's the same idea as picturing yourself doing something and actually doing it better or accomplishing a goal. When you visualize yourself, all plays together, right? When you visualize yourself doing something, you will actually do better. There was a Russian. He was actually a Russian spy. He worked for the U.S. government back in the 80s or 70s, and he got thrown in prison. But he was a champion chess player. I think his last name was Kasparov. Kasparov, I think. But he got thrown into a Russian prison because they found out that he was spying for the U.S. And so he goes to prison. I forget how long he was in. He's in there forever. He was in there for a few years. And they finally get him released. They get him out of prison or whatever. But while he was in prison, there's actually two stories that kind of go hand in hand. But while he was in prison, all he thought about to get him through the long days, because he spent actually most of his time in solitary confinement, which we've proven over and over is like one of the worst punishments that a prisoner can experience. There's nothing worse than solitary confinement for a human being, because you need social interaction. You need to feel the energy from other people. You can't just exist by yourself all the time. It's impossible. All right, you will literally die. You'll go crazy, you'll lose your mind, and you will die. But anyway, so he's in solitary confinement, he's in prison, and he spends most of his days thinking about playing chess. He's actually sitting in his mind, he's sitting in a chair across from himself, and he's playing imaginary games of chess. And he's playing these games over and over and over and over again. 10 years after he gets out of prison, he decides to go back to playing chess, and that year he beats the world champion. And he claimed that his victory was because he spent all that time imagining himself playing all that chess. The same story, there was a gentleman that was in the Vietnam War. He was a POW. This is kind of maybe true, maybe not, right? But either way, the story goes that he was an avid golfer. And prior to him going to Vietnam, he would play golf every day, or almost every day. And he goes to Vietnam, he gets captured, he's in the prison camp, and all he's thinking about to get him through that, right, was he was thinking about playing the game of golf. And so he's playing the game over and over and over in his mind. And supposedly, right, the story goes that when he came back, he actually shot a lower score in his first game, took like 7 or 8 strokes off of his already spectacular game because of all the golf that he played in his head when he was in Vietnam. And so the thoughts that you have, not just the words that you speak, but the thoughts that you have in your mind, right, actually shape your physiology. So when you, and I know I've talked about this before, but your mind controls your brain. And when your mind tells your brain certain things, it actually begins to change things in your physical body, the rest of your body. And so it's the same thing as exercising. When you go to exercise, you imagine yourself exercising. You say, well, I've done 12 reps of this. I'm gonna do 15 reps. And you imagine it over and over and over. And you do that again and again in your mind. And what you'll find is that you actually have the strength to do it 15 times instead of just 12. But those ideas and thoughts shape your body. They shape the world around you. They shape your life in general. And so one of the things, again, going back to water, right? Water, this carrier of energy, okay? Again, the same emotional energy, or you have the same flow, rather, of emotion within your psyche, within your spirit, within your soul. You have that same flow that takes place. Energy allows us to regenerate cell tissue in the body. Ill health is caused by the loss of energy. Most people's health complaints today can be attributed to functional disturbances in their body's ability to produce and utilize energy. Now, let's talk briefly about toxins. Almost done. In energy medicine, we see toxins as substances that produce energetic imbalances in the body, resulting in physical, emotional, and mental symptoms. Toxicity can produce both specific illness, like a migraine, arthritis, psoriasis, influenza, etc., and non-specific illnesses like cluster symptoms that are identified as fatigue, headaches, insomnia, bad breath, so on and so forth. We are constantly exposed to toxins every day. Toxins can be from the outside or from the inside, right? Environmental toxins can come from tap water, smog, petrochemicals, coffee, tobacco, alcohol, sugar, food preservatives, pesticides, etc. Viruses, bacteria, parasites, and even prescription or over-the-counter medication. Internally generated toxins are produced as a result of compromised digestion, inefficient metabolism, pancreatic digestive enzyme deficiency, and so on. Poor eating habits. Both internally generated and environmental toxins need to be cleared out by the body's elimination organs like liver, kidneys, lymph, colon, lungs, and skin for us to feel healthy. The body tries to compensate by having the endocrine system secrete more hormones to stimulate detoxification. Water can help with exposure to almost constant we're talking about light. Exposure to almost constant electromagnetic radiation through our smartphones, cell towers, microwave ovens, computer screens also contribute to health. And you didn't know you were in science. And when you throw into the mix heightened levels of stress created by a culture where we're expected to be accessible to work and our families 24/7, and the lack of sleep caused by our overscheduled, overstressed lives, it's no wonder your mindset, general state of health, is directly tied to our feelings, thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, and intentions. Our consciousness, if you will. Our bodies are constantly renewing themselves, and our consciousness can affect the regeneration of cells and organs positively or negatively. A change in your health, either better or worse, involves a change. Now, there's a story in the Old Testament. There's a couple of stories, right? There's the story of Abraham, right? We've been down that road a lot here recently. But you can go and read in the book of Genesis the story about Abraham and his encounter with the Egyptians and the Philistines, okay? He actually ends up in a land, and he meets a guy named Abimelech. And Abraham lies to Abimelech about his wife, right? Lies about Sarah, who she is, all this stuff. God visits Abimelech in a dream, and he says, let my man go because you're going to die if you don't. That's his wife, not his sister. He's a liar. Hello. So he goes and he talks to Abraham, and he's like, yo, fool, you about got me killed. Like, what are you doing? Just tell me the truth, bro. Like, we can be friends. And so he says, let's make a covenant, okay? There's no aught between us anymore, all right? He says, I'm going to give you these flocks. I'm going to give you all these herds. I'm going to give you these servants and all this stuff. And he's like, okay, that's cool. Let me give you 7 lambs. And the 7 lambs is actually part of the covenant that Abraham makes, which is called the sevening, okay? He says, what do you mean by all these 7 lambs? And he's like, well, actually, I'm trying to tell you that I promise that nothing is going to be bad between. Here's 7 lambs. I'm saying it 7 times, okay? That's the idea. And oftentimes when a covenant was made, which wasn't it Jacob's 7 conditions? Right? God sevened himself to Jacob in the same way that Abraham sevened himself to Abimelech and made a promise that there's not going to be an aught between us. Now, this that's right. Yes, on the mount. Yeah. So this idea is actually, or this storyline is perpetuated in the life of Isaac. All right. Wait, before I say that, Abraham goes into the land of the Philistines. He actually ends up digging wells. Digs wells of water, right? Now, you got to think about this, because back in the day, you wouldn't just go randomly dig a well somewhere, okay? You wouldn't randomly go dig a well somewhere. You would find the evidence of water. You would find the natural evidence of water, and that would be coming from a thing called an artesian well. That would be coming from a natural artesian well that's naturally springing out of the earth, right? And when they found that water, they'd say, okay, there's bound to be more water where this came from. There's bound to be more substance where this came from. And so they would start digging the well, and then they would go and they would tell their master, like they did Abraham, hey, we found water here. We found water here. Let's go ahead and finish digging the well. Let's build a structure around it. And what we'll do is we'll actually build what kind of looks like a little makeshift temple around this water source. And that way people know when they're traveling through this land, come on now, that way they know when they're coming through this area, they can go to this place and they can get a fresh drink of water for themselves and all the people that are with them. Kind of like the churches that we build today, you know, the ones that have the steeples on top and the ones that sport the cross out front. That's what we're trying to say, that there's a well been dug here. Now, like AJ said, I think it was last week or the week before, he was talking about the dry well that they put Joseph in, right? The Bible says it was a cistern, but it's a well. It was an actual well that was dug. That's one of the wells that gets redug by Isaac. It's at a place called Shechem, however you want to say it. But it gets redug by Isaac because, again, the story is perpetuated from the life of Abraham into Isaac, and we see this same scenario play out where Isaac's lying about his wife, he's lying about who she is. We run into this. I mean, it's the whole same story again, and in the process, the Philistines say, you know what? Hey, we're cool. You can travel through our land, and nobody's going to bother you. Nobody's going to mess with you. The Philistines had actually refilled the wells that Abraham dug with sand after he had passed. And so Isaac goes back into the land of the Philistines, and he redigs the wells. He goes back, and he taps into the same thing that his father had tapped into, right? Because of Abraham's covenant with God, he was able to, because it was his belief, right? It was his faith that was counted unto righteousness for him. And because of that faith, he was able to go to those places and find the source of life that God had for the people of that area or anybody that was passing through there. It's just like Pastor Kello and Diane coming to this place and realizing, seeing with the eyes of God, seeing with the eyes of Father, and we've talked about this, but creating a place where people could come if they were thirsty and they could have a drink of water. It's like a cool drink of water to someone that's parched, right? When they come in here and they hear the words of life, it can actually energize and completely rebuild the structure of your life. And so Abraham digs the wells, Isaac digs the wells, and then in God's infinite wisdom, let's read this first. Somebody say slap. Got my to you right. Trying to close it up, okay? Colossians 1. Colossians 1. Verse 15. Who is, talking about Christ, talking about Jesus the Christ. Brent did an excellent job of helping us understand the Spirit of the Christ. Not Jesus the man, but the Spirit of the Christ that dwelled in him and the Spirit that he attached himself to so that he could reach his full potential, right? Because what Jesus proves to us is that this is possible. The things that you've seen me do, you will do greater things. That's what he was saying. This is possible. This is just the beginning of what is possible if you'll only believe, if you'll be connected to the Father. So who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature? Now, every creature, every living thing, has water in it. He's the firstborn. He's the first substance. He's the beginning of the idea of creation, right? When we talk about the Logos, it's the same idea. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they are thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. By him all things consist. So this substance, I want you to hear me today. The question is God water? Well, listen, I don't actually believe that God is this water, okay? I was a little parched. No, I don't actually believe that God is the molecule that makes up water, okay? I don't think God is H2O. what I'm getting at is that God is in all things, and he has created all things for himself. And in God's infinite wisdom, as the water molecules of the universe swirled around for billions and billions, and God knows how many billions of years, because we don't even know how old things are, right? We don't know how old the earth is. We don't know how old the universe is. We don't even have an idea, not even close. Carbon dating is as close as we get, and guess what? There was stuff before carbon, okay? There was stuff before carbon, right? So this idea that the earth is a million years old or 7,000 years old or 80 billion, whatever, who cares? God, in his infinite wisdom, created all things by himself and for himself. And in him everything consists or exists. Now, Jesus told, all right, hold on. Stick with me. All right, so the wells that Isaac dug, ultimately he gives more or less the land, right, to Jacob. Now, there is a well at a place called Sychar. Sychar is what we learn is that Sychar is the town of Samaria. John 7. We're going actually to John 4. Yes. John 4. In the last, I'm going to read this, John 7:37. In the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. Are you at John 4? Say amen. John 4, verse 6. All right. Sychar. City, okay, I'm going to read verse 5. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to Joseph, his son. Joseph inherits this land from his father, right? So again, the land is the inheritance for the people of Israel, right? That's the thing that they're looking for. We're getting the promised land, right? And it gets passed down from Abraham to Isaac. Isaac redigs the wells of Abraham, and then it goes on into the family. And now Joseph receives from Jacob this little plot called Sychar, or again, Samaria, right? It's this place that actually is close to the two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And Big Brent said it earlier, the hurling of the accusation, right, occurs between these mountains. There's the blessing and the curse, right? There's these different things that are being said, right? There's different things that are being said about you. There's different things that you're saying about yourself. There's different things that you're saying about someone else. You're hurling accusations, or you're sending out a curse. And we talked about the frequencies, right? You're either sending out that positive vibe. I like how Josh says it. A lot of times when people ask for prayer and stuff, he's like, prayer sent, positive vibes sent, right? Because that's what we're talking about. That's a real energy that can travel from this place to that place. So when we talk about Butch Walters, and I'm going to tell you something, man, it's a world of difference when you hear the testimony of somebody or the story of a testimony from somebody, and then it's totally different when you hear it from the horse's mouth. I actually got to go visit with Butch and Sherry not that long ago, and he's out of the surgery. He's doing his recovery and his rehab and all that stuff. But to hear the man talk about the miracle that God performed in his life was absolutely life-changing for me. And I'm telling you, if you get the opportunity, whether it's your miracle that you're sharing with someone else or you get to just hear somebody else's testimony, I would encourage you to do it. I would encourage you, number one, to share your testimony, because your testimony is how you overcome.
They overcame in the book of Revelation by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Come on, there's a frequency that's coming out when you testify of the Spirit of God and what is possible when God's water is flowing, or when the Spirit is flowing out of that artesian well that's deep down on the inside of you. That's the kind of stuff that can happen. New lungs, walking, getting out of rehab a month earlier, ever how long it was. That's the kind of stuff that can happen. Coming back from cancer, coming back from heart attack, coming back from stroke, whatever the case is. Those are the types of things that can happen when we begin to send out those frequencies. So again, this city is located near where these two mountains would be. And Jesus and his disciples are traveling. He says, now Jacob's well was there. Again, inherited land, Joseph's land, Jacob's well. Okay? This is my theory. Well is the same well that Joseph ended up in. All right, that's just a theory. What if? What if that well is the same well that Joseph was put in by his brothers, the empty, dry well that had not been retapped yet? Now, Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well. It was about the 6th hour, and there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, give me to drink. Woo! For the disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that you, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? Now remember, if you go back to the days of Nehemiah and Ezra, the Samaritan, or that city, that region, that area, that group of people living there were the ones that were rejected at the temple. God, I feel the Holy Ghost. Those were the ones that were rejected at the temple. They said, no, you're half-breed. No. You're not pure breed. You're not totally clean. You're not totally holy. You're not made totally right by the law of Moses. In fact, he got up and stood up, and he shouted out the law of Moses, and the people wept. The people cried, and he said, you know what? You guys just need to go home, because the law was taking away. It's not doing anything but stealing and killing. That's what the thief does. The law is the thief. It steals your life. It steals your joy. It steals your peace. It steals your love. It steals those things from you. And so there's this rejection of these people, right? And they're pushed out, and they form this community, this town, this area, and it's called Samaria. And they're all the half-breeds. It's all the people that weren't good enough. It's all the people that weren't smart enough. It's all the people that weren't born in the right family. And they get rejected, they get pushed out, and they continue to be pushed out over and over and over. And so what happens is they say, well, you guys can worship in that mountain, and we'll go worship in this mountain because we believe in God too. And we think that maybe he might want to have something to do with us, so we'll set our place of worship up over here. And she says, how can you talk to me because you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan? How is that even possible? You asked me for a drink, rather. For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that saith to thee, give me to drink, you would ask of him, God. You would ask of him, and he would give you the living. Because God, in his infinite wisdom, as the water of the universe traversed the cosmos, it traversed the cosmos. That same Spirit that was in that water began to brood over the deep. And something began to swirl. And something began to shape and form. Something began to come to life. And we called it planet Earth. And God looked at it and he said it was good. And that same water and that same Spirit made its way into the belly of Mary. And it began to swirl. And God began to become flesh. And that 90% water was birthed out into a feeding trough. Praise God. And he began to grow. And as he began to grow, God began to minister his word words of life to him. Come on, the Father was having conversations with the Son. He was talking to him and telling him all the wonderful things that he was going to do. He's like Dr. Seuss. He said, all the places you will go, all the things that you will do, all the lives that you will affect. Oh, come on. He said, you're going to touch, you're going to move, you're going to heal. Come on, you're going to deliver, you're going to restore. That's all the wonderful things that the Father was saying to his Son, and he's developing him over and over. And as he reaches his adulthood, Jesus is walking along as the living water. Come on now, he's the living water. God put his Spirit in the flesh, and that living water, that Spirit of God, the artesian well that's on the inside of you that can naturally be sprung forth. Come on, it put on flesh, and it walked to a well where at one point it was dry. At one point it was empty, but somebody saw with the eyes of the Father. Come on, not only Abraham who saw with the eyes of God, but Isaac who saw with the eyes of his father. He looked back and he saw the reflection, and he said, I've got to do this thing. I'm going to provide hope. I'm going to provide life. I'm going to provide substance for the people that'll come by this way. And so he redug the well, and Joseph continued the legacy. Come on, or Jacob continued the legacy. He gave the well to Joseph, and now this place has been created. And Jesus said to the woman, he said, if you knew who you were talking to, if you knew what gift was standing in front of you, if you knew the substance, come on, the infinite wisdom of the Father that has been around the universe, you'd be asking me for something to drink, and I would give you the living water. Come on. Jesus answered in verse 13, he said, whoever drinks of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. He goes on to tell that woman, he reads her mail. Why? Because he knew every single molecule in her body. He knew all of the wisdom that was in the water that indwelled her body. Because the wise water that had been down in the earth, come on, that began to spring out, the wise water that was in the Spirit of Jesus Christ, deep down in his soul began to spring out, and it said, oh, no, I know you. You're my daughter. Come on. You're the one that I wanted to marry. You're the one that I wanted to be with. Come to me, lovely one. Come to me, my beloved, the one whom my soul loves, the one that my soul longs after. Come to me and drink. Oh, and be filled with the waters of life, a living water, a water that moves, a water that flows. Because when the water stops flowing, there's death. When the water stops flowing, it actually dies. But as long as that water is moving, praise God, there is life. It is ever changing. It is ever regenerating. You will never walk into the same river twice, even if you step foot in the same place, because it's changing constantly. The same with you. You'll never be the same person that you are today ever again. You're constantly changing. You're constantly being regenerated. Now, it's up to you which direction you go. Will you be regenerated, or will you be degenerated? Will you go through a process of de-evolution, or will you evolve into the creature that God created you to be and allow your true being to come out? Allow your true being to regenerate, your molecular structure literally be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, in the atomos, in your atoms, in the space between the spaces. You allow the Spirit of life to burst out of you naturally. Or even if you do have to tap into it, take yourself to those places, get yourself involved in worship, in meditation, in prayer, in those times and places where you can tap into that living water. The true life, the true Logos can have its way on the inside of you, and that could be expressed on the outside. Praise God. It's all in God's infinite wisdom, in His infinite love that traversed the entire cosmos before it ever landed here and ever made its way into you. It's traveling around the universe, gathering up information, gathering up knowledge, gathering up wisdom, having these experiences so that the Father come to you, relate to you, talk to you, encourage you. To think that the conversations Jesus was having with his Father were that of love and nothing else. Nothing else. Spelling anything that was not of love. Praise God. Say it with me this morning. I love him because he first loved me.